This is Square Pizza, cooked up by Shermco. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Square Pizza Podcast, a podcast about making the good things about school even better. Today's episode, I think, is a really good one. We interviewed Jason Terrell, the co-founder of Profound Gentlemen. And so if you don't know, PG is building a community for male educators of color that provide additional impact on boys of color. So a really cool, innovative, and important organization for this time for public education across our country. So they are essentially working to retain and develop male educators of color across the country. If you don't know, according to the national average, only about 2% of teachers identify as male educators of color. And this is really a disservice to all students across the country, regardless of race or socioeconomic background. Bottom line is, at least in our opinion, that the teaching workforce needs to be diversified for a number of reasons, and PG is really working on that to support all male educators of color. So we think this was another good episode. So essentially, we covered a lot, but a few interesting things. You'll learn about how Jason navigated kind of the varying socioeconomic classes in college at Furman, how Jason broke the news to his parents about switching careers, really what PG is and the inner workings of PG, why Charlotte is better than Atlanta, of course, for all of our Charlotte friends out there, and most importantly, Jason's unique experience with Square Pizza, which we think is a really funny story towards the end of the podcast. So we hope you enjoy. Check out the show notes about how you can learn more about PG and support them and the great work they're doing, and look forward to hearing your thoughts. Thanks.
Shall we? We should.
All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in to today's podcast episode. We have a good one for you today. This is we don't know what number podcast this is going to be because we haven't released it yet, but once we release it, it'll be in the intro, and you'll get all that good info. But we have Kelsey here today as well, as always.
Thanks for the intro, Greg. I'm here. But more importantly, we have our guest.
You want to say anything else, Kelsey, before we get to our esteemed guest?
No, I'm excited to be here, learning the ins and outs of podcasting.
It's great. Perfect. Kelsey's adding a lot of value already. We also have a friend, and I think a client, and I think a friend too. We can say both, yeah. Jason? All right, good.
That's fair.
That was awkward. Good. So Jason's good with that. So we have Jason Terrell here from Profound Gentlemen. I'm not going to do the official bio. Jason has that, and we're going to kind of kick it to him first just to learn more about Jason, learn about the important work of PG, and kind of have a good conversation about what they're doing, what they're seeing in the space around public education. And kind of how that fits into, obviously, the podcast and some of the platforms we want to create to support innovators in the public education space. So, Jason, say what's up to the people.
How you doing? Thank you for having me on again. I don't know what episode this is either, but
it's the best one. That's what matters.
Best one, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Always. So just tell the people that don't know you what there's only 3 people in America that don't know you. So for the 3 people that don't know you, give them the 60, 120-second spiel about who Jason Terrell is.
Who I am or who PG is?
Who you are.
Who I am. So I think always start off by saying I'm an educator first. And so I come through the lens to the work, and I come through the lens of a teacher. So I start off my professional background in the education space teaching, but I've always been like a social justice oriented kind of folk person. So yeah, that's kind of the lens I come through. So everything I approach is always through the lens of supporting students, supporting educators. So
that's perfect. And give folks I've had the pleasure and still get the pleasure to know you and work with you, right? But give the folks a little bit more context about like where you come from, how you got to where you are today, and then we'll get farther into PG and like the day-to-day stuff. So give a little background.
Yeah. So originally from Atlanta, Georgia. That's how I was born and raised. In Atlanta. I always say my parents had me in high school, so I was raised primarily by my grandparents.
So the Falcons just beat down the Panthers again for
they did.
Number of times. So
they're sorry this year.
It's a bad time for the Panthers.
But that rivalry comes up.
Yeah, that's right.
So raised with my grandparents, and kind of definitely like in a village. And my grandparents were ministers in Atlanta. So I was always around like community building, always around people. My granddad is pretty social justice oriented. So if you see him now, he still wears like a kufi on his head, and like kind of like really has like a pride of who he is and his heritage, and has taken plenty of trips to Africa, and like he comes through that lens. So I always kind of approached who I guess I credit a lot of who I am to him. And so I grew up in Atlanta. I went to public schools in Atlanta. I graduated from high school in Cobb County, so I moved with my mom when I was about in middle school, high school. And so initially when I finished high school, my goal was to go to honestly an HBCU. That's where I wanted to go, but they didn't have the finances at the time. So my mother went to Clark.
Which one did you want to go to?
Morehouse College.
Why?
Primarily because it was in Atlanta.
Okay.
My aunt works at Morehouse, so I had, I did summer camps there and was always on campus and wanted to be a part of that culture. Yep. But scholarship money was difficult. And around my senior year, I wanted to go into law, and so I found a school called Furman University, and they had a pretty good mock trial program.
Rocking the Furman Cup
Yeah,
too.
it's got
For
my
those that
Furman
can't
mug.
see it, just get the YouTube channel up. You'll be able to see Jason's mug.
And so made the decision to go to Greenville, South Carolina for college and attend Furman. And initially I was, all geared towards law school, and thought that I was going to become a lawyer. Initially I wanted to be like a civil rights attorney or a public defender. And that's why, I took a lot of my coursework in that particular space. I double majored in political science and philosophy, and just really ate the Kool-Aid of Furman in terms of the academic side of it. Socially, I struggled there because it's not a diverse place at all.
Many white people?
Yeah. It wasn't even that. It wasn't that. I think it was more more from an income. So I grew up pretty, I would say, I wouldn't say poor, but it was definitely working class.
Yep. I was just, have you heard of eating clubs?
No.
In Ivy League schools?
Oh, Davidson. I think I've heard eating clubs in relation to Davidson.
So yeah, I didn't know about this, and Betsy, my girlfriend, told me about it through, I think, a friend. But eating clubs are essentially like a fancier fraternity or sorority in Ivy League, so you have to pay extra money on top of it to be an actual club. So it's like a super segregated place to eat, often with white higher income people. That just further, it's only in my understanding, it's mostly only in Ivy Leagues or only in Ivy Leagues. On those campuses, and there's just an article today actually that she sent me about how Princeton is trying to diversify the most segregated eating club in or on their college campus.
You just eat there.
You just eat. It's social. I think there's
other benefits,
video games and billiards and TVs, a chill place.
Yeah.
But it's another. It's just crazy. I didn't think about it or know about it, and so. To your point, I think it's a real thing in many colleges and universities across the country. And the whole article in the Times was centered on a Hispanic male who was a student, first college-going student, and his family, talking from his experience of getting to Princeton, but then getting to Princeton and navigating all of that, and then navigating the eating club, which is a microcosm of navigating everything else. So
that's interesting. I think that was where I struggled the most, was develop relationships with. Not just it wasn't just white students, even black students who had higher income, family with, parents with doctors and attorneys, and not really being exposed to that. And growing up, it was really tough to navigate those kind of experiences.
Yep.
But I definitely ended up finding a small group, a community, pledge of fraternity at my university. So I was able to find my sense of purpose and sense of community there. And I think I was, honestly going to law school up until senior year. I took the LSAT a few times, but really I knew I didn't want to do it. I think I kind of said I think I lost passion for it while I was in my coursework, and I realized I didn't really want to be in a suit and tie and some Ivy Tower or some building. I really wanted to be with community members and really thinking about the stories and experience of my grandfather, with always being with people. I wanted to do something in relation to that. So every summer, instead of interning at law firms, I always went back to Atlanta and taught. So I was a teacher at Urban League. I ran 2 or 3 Urban League programs in Atlanta every summer.
So while you were teaching in those summers, were you still thinking or telling people you're going to law track?
Yeah.
When did you come out sounds bad, but when did that conversation happen where you started to be real with people?
It wasn't until probably the last semester of my senior year. I got into a few law schools. That's got a full ride to a law school, and so everyone in my family, all my my professors was okay, put my little.
So
picture
full ride
on.
to a law school senior year. Sorry, it takes me a while to catch up.
No, it's all good.
And then, full ride. So pick up.
And so
you had it.
Yeah, I was pretty much committed, and then
Which law school?
It was called Boston University. Well, Boston University Law.
Yeah.
It's called
It's got a little
Boston
school.
University.
I forget I know there's like a name for the school. I forget the name. I don't. Yeah, but it was like the.
Well done.
I almost went there for undergrad.
Really?
Yeah,
Y'all
but
could have
then
been friends.
I couldn't do it.
Well, why is that?
Well, I had gotten into Carolina,
Okay.
and I was like, I can't spend the money to go to
Out of state.
out of state
Yeah.
when I can go to Carolina here and barely
Yeah.
spend anything
Yeah,
comparative to that.
I understand. Yeah.
That made the decision for me.
It was like a diversity like scholarship that they had, and I qualified for apparently. So that's how it looked. But around my senior year, I had a friend who applied for Teach for America, and got accepted at TFA, and was like, you should look into this program, and I started to run into a few folks who I knew like who were TFA, who had that background. I didn't know anything about TFA. We didn't have a recruiter on my campus or anything. So I ended up putting in an application, and I always say like I applied like the last deadline to the program. So and I just kind of put it like a shot in the dark. I didn't think anything of it. I didn't know anything about the process, but was really fortunate to be like called in for like the second round, and then the third round where I had to teach in front of a group of folks, and got accepted and placed into a school, to a region in Charlotte. So that's kind of what opened my eyes up to teach, and so I had to make the decision between accepting this position or going to law school. And so I reluctantly I chose TFA. Well, reluctantly then. I think now in hindsight, I think it was the best decision for me. But at the time, it was kind of like pulling teeth a little bit.
And what was that micro moment like when you like had an offer in your hand, full ride, right, of like what you've been presumably telling people you wanted to do the whole time?
Working towards for 4 years.
Yeah, and then you were like, peace. Because I think, we talk about a little bit like those micro moments, professionally or personally, right? When like you think, I'm sure you think about like, what if you went to BU and like fancy lawyer, suit and tie, like PG may or may not have existed, which we'll get to. But like, what was that micro moment like where you were like, no to law, yes to public education?
I think it was like with that deciding factor. Like
I think so. Yeah.
It was. Actually, the funny thing is, I had a professor named Dr. H.N. And he sat me down in his office, and he basically told me in so many words, like he asked me did I want to eat. I told him what I wanted to do, type of law I wanted to practice, and he was like, don't do it. Like it won't be financially beneficial for you long term. And he said he doesn't see me as an attorney. He's like, I see you as a community organizer. And on campus, I was the president of our NAACP chapter, and I was like, did all this like social justice oriented stuff on our campus. And he saw me doing other things, and I think that he actually saw something in me that I don't think I saw really. So I think his kind of like backing gave me the confidence to say, you know what, like I'm not going to pursue law. I'm going to teach.
Yep.
And I think the hardest part, honestly, was convincing my parents. We don't have an attorney in my family, and like again, like I come from definitely like humble beginnings, like high school parents. Like they were really pushing me in that direction, and have always said I was going to be this big attorney. And so when I told them I was going to teach, that was that was met with a little bit of like a little hesitation.
Was it like around the dining room table, like, hey, mom and dad, like we got to talk about something?
Yeah, it was.
It was a real
like
conversation.
going to Charlotte to teach, and it's kind of what you doing, why,
And so they didn't hear about this till after you got into TFA.
Yeah. I didn't know anything about TFA, so I thought it was just some random program.
Yeah.
I didn't realize like the level of like really a prestige it had until I got into like the core. I just thought it was like a teaching service core, AmeriCorps type program.
Had you like already signed, like, I don't even remember if you, so I did Teach for America. Kelsey did not. She's holding it down for the non-TFA people in the room.
Yeah.
But we're welcoming,
Thank you.
welcome to this and other future conversations about TFA. But I don't remember like if we signed a commitment or paperwork. So like, did you commit to TFA before actually telling mom and dad?
I did, yeah.
So there's no backing out.
No, I wasn't. And like I think the benefit
bold.
too was,
so you knew then, like you knew you were serious.
One of my roommate in college, and he was also my fraternity brother. He accepted a job in Charlotte.
Yep.
And he does like he's in business, and he went to business school, and he's in Minnesota now. So I knew I was gonna room with him. So I was like, it was perfect for me.
Yep.
So I ended up telling my mom, like, my parents know.
You had the plan set.
I had the plan set already. I just had to communicate
At least
that.
you had options. You had an A option that was good.
Yeah.
And they went with it. Obviously, you couldn't have backed out. They weren't gonna let you quit about it at that point.
But I mean, it was all good. I think once I got in, I think like I found my purpose and my sense of like self in the classroom.
Right.
And, like kind of stepped into who I was as like a man as well.
Right.
And I think they kind of saw that once I kind of got in and like kind of see me navigate the space a little bit.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I guess I wonder too, like if that decision to like not take not the law school would have been easy, right? But take maybe the road less traveled, if you will, to TFA and to teach something more true to who you were, kind of like built that muscle to do it more for things to come with PG and other stuff. Because I mean, we probably all know friends who like have the good golden handcuffs in terms of like good job, high income, but like don't love their life and are always like thinking about what they could have done or what they should have done, but now are making too much and have too nice of cars and too nice of houses. They can't just like maybe go do or like test or risk anything. They're kind of locked down already.
Yeah, that's true.
And so just something that, you know, is kind of resonate with me around how you kind of built that muscle of like following what you believe in and probably continue to do that with the work you're doing now.
That's true.
That's cool. So teaching and then PG. So like tell us about PG.
Yeah, so I ended up doing so TFA's 2-year program.
Mm-hmm.
I actually stayed past the 2-year. My goal was actually become like more of a career teacher. So I stayed for 3 years at my middle school, and I was actually my 3rd year. I was looking to transfer to a charter school in Atlanta.
Why a charter school and why Atlanta?
So I did.
Well, I guess Atlanta makes sense.
No,
Family.
why Atlanta?
Yeah,
Atlanta was family. I just wanted
Besides
to
the
be
football team.
close to home.
Chipper Jones.
And as far as like the charter school, it wasn't like anything like. I don't think it was like any strategic decision. It was more just trying to find a job.
Okay,
And,
cool.
It was a guy who I'm not gonna. I'm glad I didn't take the job because the charter school was in the news and it's like he was embezzling money and there's a lot of crazy.
Is it
stuff.
still open today?
Nah.
No. Yeah.
So it's not open.
Decisions, man. Those micro decisions are important, right?
So I'm glad in hindsight that I didn't take that job. A lot of TFA teachers taught at that particular charter school.
Okay.
And it was pretty well known in the community. So. Needless to say, it was around my 3rd year of teaching. I ended up having, I always knew Mario in terms of like we roomed together in Institute.
Mario Javon Shaw,
yeah,
who is co-founder of PG. Yep.
And so we taught same subject, same grade, different schools. So we always knew each other in the TFA space. But we actually the real true story of how we started was I think it was around my 2nd or 3rd year. I was looking to actually join TFA staff. So I was thinking about recruitment position only for their Black male initiative. So at the time, TFA had a program called Dream Rise Do, where they were like recruiting Black males into the profession. Mario was kind of the poster child. So he was on all the posters and like so I knew about the program through Mario, but they put out an application talking about like you can be on the forefront of like hiring a new wave of men of color into the education space, Black males in particular. So that inspired me, even though I wanted to teach, but I was thinking about what does this other role look like, supporting other teachers like me.
Yep.
So me and Mario both applied for that particular job. We both made it to the final round. They flew us somewhere.
And y'all both applying for one position.
I think it was 2 or 3 positions because it was a national team.
Got it.
So
Understood.
you would have had different places that you were based.
Okay.
Needless to say, we both didn't get that job. And I remember sitting like afterwards, like we were sitting in like sitting down like after the interview and kind of like feeling pretty good about it, but getting a call saying we both, I didn't get it and he didn't get it either. That's kind of what sparked our idea to try to do something local.
Do those positions still exist?
Not anymore, no.
Do you think because they didn't hire you and Mario?
I mean, I feel like
I'm gonna get you to say something good.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's
No.
I don't know. I know Dream Rise Do happens like not nationally anymore. I think like Charlotte, the local Charlotte TFA, they still do like a celebration every February.
Yep.
And some TFA regions do, but I do think it wasn't like it kind of a flavor of the month thing. I think it was hot at the time to try something, but I don't think it wasn't sustainable. I don't think they had the strategy in place to make it sustainable long term.
That's fair.
And so now the position doesn't exist.
Yeah. It's crazy. What they would have known and should have known, right, back in the day. So then PG.
Yeah, so we actually got together we met at a Bojangles off of West Trade Street in Charlotte near Johnson C. Smith, just like for breakfast, and we were thinking about what can we do like local to Charlotte. I was still teaching at the time. Mario was working at a nonprofit, and we decided to like just kind of like do like a social club at first, like an affinity group for teachers, all men of color, and it was initially geared towards men in the TFA network. And so we had all men of color in the TFA space, like 10 of us at the time. We would come together for like the first few months just to like it was just to build community and talk to each other. And then we started to they started to invite friends who they knew that were teaching and fraternity brothers and whatever. And that group started to grow from like the two of us to a period of about 5 or 6 months. We were having like 30 to 40, 50 men at the time. And it was initially like...
So like a clear demand, right?
Yeah,
There's like demand and interest for this.
Yeah, and there was no name. There was no like vision or mission or budget. It was just like a group of people gathering for like swings and spaghetti dinners. And like we were talking and just kind of just built community. And I always say it wasn't like I didn't even think about the nonprofit. It was really the strength of the group. They were like, we want to do more than just meet once a month. Like, what are we doing? Like, we're going to have some action steps. We're going to like do some conferences. Like, what are we doing with our time? And so they were looking for that next step and that additional level of support. And so they kind of turned it to me and Mario to figure it out. Since we were the folks who organized the group, half of the group was probably folks that I knew personally. Half of the groups were the folks that Mario knew personally. To try to figure out what we could do. So I think me and Mario, we got together and we thought about like we birthed what is PG. First, initially, it wasn't like what it is now, but on paper, we kind of like drafted it out. We created like a website on Wix, like a free website. And initially, the goal was to do like I think it was just like a newspaper. We wanted to like put out a newspaper of stories about Black male educators, and that was pretty much all of it, of what it was. So yeah, I can tell you like the next.
Yeah.
Thing, but, yeah.
I mean, I think going back to like the Dream Rise Do things, that was interesting. Something. I mean, I've known you 3-4 years and worked together for almost 2, but like in almost like the micro moment, do you think about what would have been? So like there's like Boston, which was a clear decision, right? And then like the Dream Rise Do, if you would have got that position, if like PG would exist in the way that it does now.
I don't think so. I think I think I believe in God, but I believe that there's like certain like I'm always put on certain paths.
Yeah.
And get told decision like no on a lot of opportunities that at the time it seems like it's like a I don't know, it's like a punishment almost, but it's like it's a blessing at the end. Even like like undergraduate decision between Morehouse and Furman, like blessed that I had the chance to go to the school I went to, met my wife there, and the whole 9.
And you played baseball growing up in sports?
Yeah, I did.
So like the connection there is and this is selfish for me, but like did getting. Because like I feel like growing up playing sports, getting like owned on the basketball court or on the football field was like the absolute worst thing that could have happened. And then because you have to like see your boys the next day, you have to like see your dad or your mom who like, no, you got owned. You also have to watch film again about like getting owned, the same thing. So like no's in the professional world still hurt, but to me, like I felt like I built up such a muscle through sports, being told no or getting like shot down so much that like no's professionally didn't hurt as much as I felt like other people, because I was used to getting like rejected athletically.
Yeah, that's
so it was used to me. So I guess like for you, knowing you play sports and baseball, like similar experience, different.
Yeah, even like 100% similar. 100% like losing or getting in like trouble for not hustling or whatever the case was. Like even now, randomly, like I picked up. I've been boxing for like the last six months.
Yeah, looking good.
So I've been sparring too as well. And so like that's been a humbling experience because 15-year-old kids like outperforming me and everything.
15.
Yeah, so some good guys.
They put you up against 15-year-olds?
Yeah, I'm like they're good.
Not even adults. That's not legal.
I'm learning.
Right.
I'm learning that space of it. But I think always putting yourself in positions where you're being humbled helps, because you got to like try harder and work harder to get back. And just go back at it the next day. So I don't know. I don't really take no's as like I kind of take them as a badge of honor now.
Yeah, I think that's real.
Opportunity.
Yeah,
that's right. Next thing up. So PG now, as it exists today, give people the 60-second understanding of like what PG is and how it serves and how it's successful.
Yeah. So in short, we decided to focus our program on retention. So initially, we started off as just a space. Then we went to recruitment. Now it's a retention-based program for male educators of color, from pre-service all the way, or from college all the way through leadership. And so we support right now about 400 teachers across the country. Majority of our footprint is in North Carolina, where we teach or where we taught and have more community. But we do support almost like satellite and auxiliary chapters of our program in Chicago, Atlanta, D.C., and Memphis. And then some of them are virtual. So we have educators that we work with who are not in these 5 communities, but who are spread out throughout the country. But we've been really intentional about building like local chapters of our program in these 5 cities that I mentioned, or 5 communities that I mentioned. So that's kind of what we do and how we do it.
And why, for maybe the unfamiliar listener, why are black male educators important?
Yeah. So nationally, there's you always hear the word the term 2%.
Yep.
So nationally, out of all the teachers who teach across the country, actually it's less than 2%, but just to round up, we say 2% of all your teachers are men of color, even though your students of color, especially our boys of color, represent way more than 2% of the students who are in public schools.
Yep.
Majority of our major districts across the country now are majority students of color, like Charlotte, Atlanta, Memphis, D.C., Chicago, like most of your inner city, cities, predominantly cities, our students of color in those districts.
Yep.
But unfortunately, we always go back to the student data. Like if you look at the data, only two states across the country have a graduation rate of 80% and or higher for boys of color, and that's like Maine and like North Dakota.
Two states in America have 80% graduation rates for boys of color.
Yeah.
Maine and
Higher
North
than
Dakota.
80%.
Higher than
80% or higher.
Maine and North Dakota.
Yeah.
And I can't speak. I don't think I've ever been to either.
I've
But
been
I'm
to Maine,
assuming
but
the
Not
North
North
Dakota population of boys of color is rather low.
I'm sure it is. Yeah. And so
I mean, still important, right?
yeah,
still
still
important
important.
nonetheless, but like
Yeah.
much different,
yeah.
much different numbers.
And so there's a lot of data. Particularly, there's a study that came out through Johns Hopkins University that showed when they actually it's a study that was conducted in North Carolina, but they showed that when a black student has a teacher of the same race, they have at least one by the third grade. There's a 13% more likelihood that student will graduate from high school and go into college or just go into the career field. If they have two, it's a 37%. If it's three, then it kind of increases as they go up. And they found that it's even higher for boys of color, for black boys in particular. So there's a direct link between having black male teachers and black males seeing themselves and seeing possibilities of what could be. And so I definitely experienced that while I was teaching.
You had a black male educator?
Never had one growing up, but
Never
I would
had
say
one.
my first educator was
So K-12,
my
no
father.
black male educators?
I had
Besides dad at
principals,
home.
but
Yep.
I grew up with my father and my grandfather.
Okay.
Both my grandfathers and uncles. I had a very large community of men
Yep.
who pretty much helped navigate me. And so I am here where I am because of like my fathers and my grandfathers and like keep me on the right track with
Yep.
love and discipline
Sure.
as well. A lot of students have it and some students don't.
Yep.
And so I think it's important that, at least while they're in school, they have positive examples of like mirrors that
Yep.
they can look to that help them throughout their K-12 experience.
And so you didn't have any traditional black or male educators of color K-12, but you had principals.
Principals,
You had a
counselors.
Okay.
Mr. Stokes was like my 6th grade counselor.
Shout out to Mr. Stokes.
Yeah, I remember getting in trouble and going to see him a few times. And him and my dad sitting me in the office and like a little mini intervention. Like,
Yeah.
So I had like supports along the way. Just definitely, and again, I grew up in church, so
Yep.
I had a lot of church like men
Okay.
who were like again just checking on me on Sundays and
Yep.
just like making sure that I was okay.
Good. And so that was Atlanta. Kelsey, putting you on the spot. You grew up in
Charlotte,
Charlotte. Do you have any black male educators?
Mr. Donald, elementary school.
Yes,
I can
okay.
I can count them on one hand.
Really?
Yeah.
Do it.
Mr. Donald.
I mean, if you want.
Are we only doing black male educators?
Male educators of color.
Mr. Donald
One.
and Mr. Behringer. Mr. Behringer wasn't my teacher. He was my basketball coach, but he taught in my school.
So 2, 3,
So yeah, Mr. Behringer was a middle school basketball coach at Piedmont.
K-12.
Yeah.
K-12.
K-12 through high school.
Yeah, through high school.
And you went to, what high school you go to in CMS?
Myers Park.
Mars Park. So,
Piedmont Middle, Amy James Montessori Elementary School.
got it.
Doesn't exist anymore.
So Jason grew up in Atlanta. Kelsey was Charlotte. I was the booming metropolitan of Toledo, Ohio. Did not have any male educators of color. Had coaches.
Yeah, I had coaches too.
Have baseball, football coaches. And I would say like people in the community that we knew and like understood, but no traditional K-12 educators in my space. So it's a microcosm of 3 cities. Charlotte is a city, not just a township, I promise. But I think relevant and still very real today, right?
Yeah, it is.
And I think what's true that we know from the research, but also in public education, that it's not just good for boys of color.
No, it's not.
It's good for everybody,
Yeah.
right? And there's research. I mean, can you speak to any of that?
Yeah, there's plenty of research, qualitative and quantitative that show that, having black males present or just diverse teachers, period,
Right.
is important for like white students, black students, like all types of students.
Yep.
And I think if anything, it promotes like just like, you know, you can to see professionals who are different from you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that says a lot about like, I don't know, like I think that informs a lot about how you grew up. I think John King, the Secretary of Education, I remember hearing him speak one time. It was a funny quote that he mentioned, but I think it was real. But he was like, it's hard to be racist if you were taught calculus by a black teacher.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, you know, if you had these experiences of seeing folks who are professional, who look different from you,
Mm-hmm.
who don't identify with you, I think it changes your lens of how they are and what that community is like.
I mean, it could go a number of different ways, right? But I think from my own personal reflection of people who I know or have met who maybe I would consider racist or have racist tendencies, I think from what I know about them have not been exposed to diverse communities or cultures. And on the flip side, friends, family that have grown up in more diverse communities or just been around different cultures, generally more open and aware to a number of different things.
Yeah.
And there's, a lot goes into that, from urban planning to housing to the way neighborhoods and schools are segregated, and exposure to even access to black male educators or cultures in general. Not all kids or communities have access to those things sometimes.
Yeah.
Good. So maybe we could go a number of different ways here, guys, about this. I think like not only important for male educators of color and boys of color, but like we said, everybody in the classroom and in the building and the community, right? And I think what I appreciate about PG2, you can tell me if this isn't correct, but you're not saying like dropping black male educators in a school is a panacea, that it's a silver bullet to solve all cures of education. I think some people will try to throw rocks at that, right? So maybe talk about some of like the development and like the coaching you guys do that is very like thoughtful around how you support your black male educators.
Yeah, I agree. It's not, it's not a silver bullet. It's so much that goes into it, from the school culture to parent engagement.
Yep.
I think this is just like one piece of the large puzzle, but we typically like to think about our training in 3 ways. So we support educators not just in content. So oftentimes when you think about the typical teacher programs, they're really like heavy on pedagogy and content, which is important, but that doesn't tell the whole story. So we like to start off first with more character development, and that's really around like identity work. So as professionals, period, we all come to our work with our own experiences that that we were brought up under, or our own assumptions and beliefs, sometimes the biases that we hold.
Mm-hmm.
Even black male teachers have our own biases of what school is and what it isn't, and how, a lot of the ways personally that I was raised by my father and my grandparents. So my grandfather showed up in how I treated my male students, and I coached sports, so it definitely showed up in how I coached. And so I think, a lot of it is like understanding and unpacking what do you come with, the negative and the positive, that you can leverage to help support your students beyond the content. So that character piece is really important. I feel like oftentimes we don't think about the character piece. In addition to that is also like, folks, when teachers get burned out, like October is like the hell month for educators. So, generally, like they say that, teachers of color have this additional tax when they're in school buildings, because they're pulled in a lot of different directions in terms of being like the behavior specialist, or sometimes coaches, and like informally the ISS teacher. So I think it's important that even from like a mental health standpoint, like teachers are just being checked on and figure out, ask the question of how you doing first before we get to like your work. So that's like the first level of support that we provide. The second is that content piece. So we understand that to be, we're all teachers and we're trying to be effective educators and move student performance. And so we want to make sure that educators have at least a baseline of like instructional practice and feel sound and comfortable. Off the misnomer, like we oftentimes, when you think about black male teachers in particular, most folks assume that they're not great in content or data, or like the data isn't strong. And we want to definitely like disrupt that. Like there's a lot of great, amazing teachers who happen to be men of color who are leading, really, really intelligent, or who are leading like, curriculum in their schools, or who are leading content in their schools, and we want to continue to highlight them. And the last piece of training that we provide is community leadership. And so that just basically is, what are you doing beyond the 4 walls of your classroom to impact change? That could look like informal roles, like coaching a sport, or you're impacting students beyond. If you were a coach, you understand like what does it mean? You're with students almost like 9, 10 o'clock at night sometimes. To be in more formal leadership roles, like going to principalship roles, or maybe dean roles, or curriculum instructional roles. So we definitely promote educators taking their leveraging their expertise beyond the four walls of their classroom.
Mm-hmm. And I would say that I'm previously a teacher. For our listeners, I'm a white male, and so like maybe and this is going back to the level of support you all provide for your male educators of color, is comprehensive in many ways. Many schools are not built, funded, or supported to provide this type of resource or support for any educators in the building, let alone male educators of color in the building. But then even just reflecting on my experience as a white male who taught in a Title I school in Charlotte, there was no training or conversation around like race, equity, privilege, or anything in that way that I would have been better armed to just understand how to navigate those conversations or just lead those conversations to be a better educator for my students who maybe didn't necessarily look like me from the outside.
Yeah.
So being able to have that for teachers is important, but then just given how low the numbers are for male educators of color, incredible that you guys are able to do that across the board as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I always say what we're doing isn't like, isn't a unicorn. Like, this is just best practices.
Right.
Like, I think how we drafted the program is we partnered with a professor named Dr. Chance Lewis. He's based out of UNC Charlotte. Does amazing work. We actually shouted him out at or honored him at our last fundraiser event this past November. But he has, countless amounts of research on Black and male teacher recruitment and retention, and a lot of the strategies that he suggests are the strategies that we use within our program, and they're not new. They're just like, how do you support teachers?
Yep.
Cohort size, small learning environments to support teachers. Really thinking about the teacher as a professional versus like just like someone you just output content. And so, a lot of the things we're doing again aren't new, but they're just kind of, I don't know why they're innovative in the space, but they seem to be.
It's the implementation of it.
Yeah,
that's the fact of it, right? There's no mouthpiece to it. There's no like, this is what we need to do. Y'all got to work. Y'all figured it out. We talk about it a lot in our work, but also supporting PG, but also other organizations too. Like many school districts are billion-dollar organizations, and those fundings are tied, but it often takes innovators on the outside to just get things done.
Yeah.
And, you and Mario as two Black male educators took it upon yourself to do it. And so although maybe not, you weren't building a rocket ship, you were figuring out how to do it in ways that nobody else had before. And so that was real. So go ahead. We got times on our show, but brag a little bit. Talk to people about the data of the 400 male educators of color y'all support. Are they good? Are y'all good?
Yeah.
Tell people a little bit about the data.
Yeah. So we track our performance, I guess, like our impact in 3 areas. So the first area we look at is retention.
Yep.
So our big goal is 90% of the folks that we work with will stay in the profession or education year over year. So we're a 5-year organization. So over the last 4 years, on average, we're about 92% retention in the field. This is about 36%.
92% retention. Yeah, sorry, you're about to say it.
Yeah, this is about 36% higher than traditional men of color who are not in PG's membership.
Yep.
And so we like to say that we can I think we help folks understand their purpose and connect their purpose and their work together. And when you marry those two, you're more fired up and you're willing to make change happen. The second area that we look at is teacher leadership. So we understand that to us, leadership doesn't mean like you have to leave the classroom. You could be a career-long teacher and still be a leader in your building.
Yep.
But it's acknowledging and highlighting folks who are, and like really respecting those folks who are silent champions and are silent leaders. But we do a lot of leadership training and development for our educators. So this year, I think 40% of our educators stepped into leadership roles. And so these roles actually came with higher pay, high compensation, which means that they can provide a better quality of life for
helping
them
their
and
mobility,
families.
which is a big issue in many cities across the country, right?
1,000%.
Yep.
And then the last area that we like to look at is around efficacy. So just how teachers are feeling about their schools and about the environments they teach in. So oftentimes, when I was a teacher, I would oftentimes hear like my veteran teachers in my building tell me to leave, like hear negative things said about the profession by teachers
to get out.
And so we don't want to make sure that teaching we're trying to change the profession. So it's important that the folks who are teaching are happy and feel like they're fired up and they're feeling their work is connected to a higher calling, a higher purpose, whatever that purpose is. Could be it could be spiritual, it could be social, but connecting it to a higher purpose. And so about every year, consistently, about 95% of our educators say that they feel like fired up and ready to go about their work because of PG support.
It's incredible. So the data tells us y'all are killing it.
I hope so. Yeah.
So then
Yeah.
the next question is why or what does it take for school districts to partner or support with PG? Why wouldn't every school district in the country have this?
I don't know why. We're trying to figure that out. I mean, I think the biggest
Is
thing
that a plan? Like, is that possible? If we get every school district in the country to call you, it's a conversation to have.
Yeah, we got to probably talk about scaling and
Okay.
everything and the numbers. But
Should we shout out the phone number?
yeah, that's
Put it in the show notes.
That's the vision. I think we initially didn't start the model through a district relationship. So like it was all teacher centered and teacher led. So up until
User focused,
yeah,
right, which is important.
Yeah, like up until this year, 100% of the folks who came to PG came on their own accord. So we didn't have to do any strategic outreach. Honestly, like we have a waiting list of folks waiting to get into the program.
Yeah.
I think we're trying to change that up to be a little bit more strategic about how we create systems change. In order to do that, we have to partner with district school networks. And so we're now in the process of like taking on district clients and relationships to think about how we support teachers throughout the district and like be strategic about tracking their data and like working with a specific segment of folks in one particular area. So I think we're open to it now. But initially that wasn't our vision at first. And again, we're 5 years in and this is an evolving process. So I think we're evolving and we're learning and we're making mistakes and trying to adapt the model to make sure we're sustainable long term.
That's great. We'll put Jason's phone number in the show notes so all the superintendents listening can call him to support their black male educator or male educators of color. All right, we're running short on time. Let's do some fun questions, Jason, so the people get to know you a little bit. Yeah. One goal for 2020 for Jason Terrell.
Personally.
Wherever you want to go.
Oh, man. I have one. So the biggest thing is I don't know if it's a goal or not. But it is a goal. It's I don't want any big changes this year. So I want to keep things as consistent as possible.
Interesting.
So 2018 I got married.
Yep.
2019 I had a child.
Yep.
So the last 2
shout
years,
out to Julius.
Yeah, shout out to Julius. So the last 2 years have been like I haven't stopped from like marriage to kid like to a new son. So I'm actually looking for 2020 just to
2020 you're looking for a daughter.
To more like establish.
Jason almost blushed.
I actually want a daughter in the future, not now. But like to establish more like financially, like establish like more of a financial, support a foundation, establish more of a social foundation. Even thinking about like purchasing homes. Like we're trying to like not have any crazy life changes or big life changes.
So Jason's taking a nap in 2020. That's one goal.
Like put my
we're supporting districts across the United States.
Across scaling.
Yeah.
Next question: Atlanta or Charlotte?
As far as what?
Life.
Like where I personally where I'm living, or
whichever way you would take it.
I think Charlotte has grown on me in terms of like it's definitely I'm finding my sense of community, and Charlotte is really interested in that. Every little area seems like it's its own separate community. Like there's like communities within a community. So it's hard to find yourself and find your space here. But I definitely think like I'm starting to find my own lane. I think Atlanta will always be home. That's where all my family is. I'm the only one that's not in the Atlanta area. So it does feel like it's always a good time to be back. So we go back all the time, like once a month at least, to have my mom and my family and my dad see my son and everything. But that always holds a special place.
So you said Charlotte was better?
But nah.
All right, next
Atlanta's
question.
better.
All right, good. What does Square Pizza make you think about?
So funny thing is, I think growing up, probably into like 5 or 6, I was always used to Square Pizza, so I didn't really know that pizza was like triangle.
That's my favorite story. Yeah, I'm so happy. We just found that out today before we started.
Until that, I'm a public school kid through and through. So that's so I'm used to Square Pizza on just different days of the week. Even breakfast pizza was Square.
I don't think anyone will top that answer.
I know we're going out bad on the first episode.
And so I hate to say it, but like I didn't really realize it didn't dawn on me that pizza wasn't necessarily Square, because I just thought it was always Square. I had more pizzas that was Square than it wasn't. So
it's lived experiences.
Yeah,
right.
So I get it.
Lack of access to triangle shaped pizza.
I didn't have a lot of outside of only time I had like pizza was like those reading programs.
Yeah. Pizza Hut things, crushing books.
Yeah, trying to read books to get Pizza Hut. But otherwise, my parents weren't buying pizza like that. So it was Square Pizza for the most part.
All right, last question for the people. What's one piece of advice you'd give to a male educator of color listening?
I think your work is bigger than you. So like it's about you, but it's not about you. And that's a TFA-ish kind of quote. But like it's always a higher purpose of what we're doing. So I think everything is like it's a lot more than what teaching the 40 kids. Like it's that and also changing the narrative of teachers to come. So
Yep.
I feel like my work is a lot bigger than me. Like I'm doing it, but it's also like it's narrative and culture shifting as well.
Cool. Perfect. All right, y'all. That's all we got. We'll put information and notes in the postscript. And so check back with us for the next episode. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Hey guys, this is Greg. Thanks again for checking out the podcast episode. Feel free to show us some love on social media. So Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, at Shermco, SCHERMCO, and hashtag Square Pizza Pod. I would love to see your reviews and connect with you there. Stay in touch for the next episode.